again, my friends, and welcome back once more to the Invisible College. Today's talk is going to be rather different from many in that I'm not going to be using these slides. I've got a few cards with notes on just to help me get through, but I want this to be a rather more different and more personal talk than many of them which I do. First of all, if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, yes, I know it's boring. I'm not going to take up too much time, but please do press the subscribe button. If you like the video at the end, like it. I'll tell you more about how you can join the college when we get to the end. Now then, we have this whole question, which I think is becoming very pertinent at the moment, is just who is the antichrist? Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, in the book of Revelation, which is the last book in the Bible, there are a whole number of prophecies. This book was written by St. John. I believe it is the same John who was the apostle of Jesus. He was the youngest of the apostles, and he lived to be a ripe old age, into his 80s, possibly 90. And he wrote this book towards the end of his life when he's living in what was then known as Asia Minor. We would call it Turkey today. And he was in exile on the island of Patmos. So he wrote this book, which is based on a vision that he had for the end of time, the end of the age, the end of the epoch, the cycle of cycles, they call it, secula seculorum in Latin. Means cycle of cycles. It doesn't necessarily mean the end of the world, but it's a long period cycle. I believe this long period cycle is actually the same as the cycle of the equinoxes, the precession of the equinox, which takes roughly 26,000 years to make one entire cycle. I am going to do a whole cycle on what I call astrosophy, not the same as astrology, but the understanding of how the signs and the cycles actually reflect epochs and are a calendar, if you like, for God. But that's a whole other subject, and it's not what I want to go into today. Within this book of Revelation, there's a prophecy that just before the Christ returns, because the prophecy in the Bible is that Jesus is coming back. You realize that. It's not just a one-off, go down there into Judea, get crucified, rise from the dead, go to heaven, and that's it. He's coming back. And he's coming back specifically to rescue us all. He's already paid for us, and now he wants to get back what he paid for. That's how it's put in the Bible, how I would see it. But before then, there's kind of a last battle, a last outpouring of evil and the devil trying to take over. He knows he's defeated, but he's going to have a last fling anyway. So I've put in this lecture, who is the Antichrist? Just put my reading glasses on. Now then, are we talking about a world leader? Someone we already know. I mean, could it be Putin, for example? Putin of Russia. A lot of people are very worried about Putin and his ambitions. Or Xi Jinping. I mean, China. China's the red dragon country, isn't it? Or not necessarily red, but it's a dragon country. And it's got this leader, Xi Jinping. And it's very cleverly managed to get control over the economics of the entire world. It's been happily selling products at nice lockdown prices. People have been investing all their money in China, or at least the people who got lots of money, building factories there, transferring all their business there, so they can pay peanut wages to the Chinese, take the products back to the West or wherever, and sell them at a high price, a much higher price, and make a big profit. I mean, good business, you would think, in the short term. But what's actually happened is now that we find ourselves dependent on China. So is it Xi Jinping, with China about to overtake, if it hasn't already overtaken America, USA, in gross domestic product? Or is it Biden, President Biden of America? You know, this empty shell of a man who seems to have lost his mind completely, can't string a sentence together, but something could be working through him. Is it him? You know, is he the puppet? The puppet master's pulling his strings. Or here's another one which you probably haven't thought of, and that's President Erdogan of Turkey. Why do I say that? Well, there are all sorts of prophecies about Gog and Magog, and I think they apply to him. Is Gog and Magog the same as the Antichrist? Is it going to be Erdogan? And then, of course, we have to wonder, is it a politician who's now in the background? Someone like Obama, for instance. Obama, I mean, he's a snaky individual, in my opinion. You might like him, but I think he's devious. And Tony Blair, exactly the same. There's something about him. And certainly, I don't think Britain benefited from his premiership. You might think so, but seems to be hell-bent on making as much money as possible now. Or is it one of the Rothschilds? Yeah, you hear a lot about conspiracies about the Illuminati and the Rothschilds. Is it one of them? Bill Gates, yeah, these big tech people. He's a strange man, isn't he? Seems to be connected somehow with his Epstein character who was suicided in jail. That's what they say. Of course, there's old George Soros. He's now in his 90s, I think. What a strange man he is. He's Jewish in Hungary during the Second World War, but pretended he wasn't and worked for the Nazis, selling the houses of Jews who had been sent off to the death camps. What a nice man, eh? And then he made all his money, his first billion, by trying to bring down the Bank of England. And he's still extremely far, far to the left. Is it him? So who can we identify as being Antichrist? Now, before we talk about the Antichrist in detail, I think we need to remember that there is something, or a someone, a consciousness, a being we call the devil or Lucifer. And you think, well, no, Adrian, you've got it wrong. That's just an extrapolation of evil. It's just a metaphor. He doesn't really exist. It's just all in your mind. It's a projection of the shadow. There has to be plus and minus and everything, and that's just an imaginary thing. Well, that's not what it tells us in the Bible. It tells us very specifically that there was an angel, a very high angel, who fell, who became filled with pride and wanted to take over at least part of the universe. Even if you couldn't have it all, he wanted to take God's place. And then you say, oh, Adrian, don't talk about God. There's no such thing as God. You haven't to grow up, will you? Well, who do you think made everything? And if you say, well, it's just there. Well, how is it just there? To my way of thinking, and I'm going to do lectures on this too, the universe that we see out there, all those stars and planets and galaxies and groups of galaxies and everything, they're all kind of like the brain of God. The mind, we have a mind, and our mind works through our brain. Our mind does not come out of our brain. It is not a function of our brain. Our brain is the machine that our mind uses. Just as I use my computer, I can use my brain. And if my brain is broken, of course I can't use it. And then maybe go gaga, but it doesn't mean I've lost my mind inside me. Your mind is what looks out through your eyes. And it is something that you'll carry with you after death. God is a mind, primarily. And he creates through giving orders as will. Do this, let it be so. And to some extent, we have the same power that we can make things, and that is part of our gift as human beings. But there was this angel who fell, called Lucifer. And we sometimes call him Satan. He's also known as Ahriman in Zoroastrian tradition, and I think in ancient Egypt they called him Set, and it's kind of this being who is a very powerful angel who's cast out of heaven and comes down to the earth, and here he causes havoc. He wants to rule. Well, he does rule the earth at the moment. Jesus refers to him as the prince of this world, and a prince is an angel, a type of angel. And when Jesus says that, he is actually acknowledging that he has a certain rulership over the world as it is. It's just that that rulership is being taken from him, and he's going to be punished for what he's done. He doesn't like that at all. But anyway, so he's a fallen angel. And one thing you have to understand about this guy, this Satan, Lucifer, is he's very, very intelligent. He's more intelligent than Elon Musk. You might think he's another candidate for antichrist. I don't know. But he's a deceiver, and he tells lies. And that is one of the characteristics of the devil, Lucifer, is that he tells lies, tells porky pies. But, you know, if you have a child and they haven't done their homework and they say, oh, the dog ate it, you can see through that lie immediately, can't you? But the devil is much more clever than that, and he conceals his lies in half-truths. So he says things which are kind of plausible. They kind of, yeah, that sort of works in a funny kind of way, and yet it's not the truth. So we are faced with this situation that we're dealing with a very intelligent being who's very artful in his lying. He's worse than any skillful barrister. You know, these what you would call a lawyer in America. I forget what you call the ones in court in America, attorney or something. But we call them barristers in Britain. And they can argue things round and get murderers off on a technicality, or they can convict someone. Or they can hunt someone down. There was this whole thing, wasn't there, with the last President Trump, with this whole Russiagate business. And it turns out now that there was no truth in it, that this was based on a document which was, a pack of lies. And yet they were able to play with that and use it and manipulate it and play with it right through his presidency. Even impeach him twice. So the whole thing is that one of the characteristics of the devil is he's very cunning, and he tells lies. He doesn't care about the truth at all. He just tells whatever he thinks is going to be of benefit to him, and he'll do it in such a way that it sounds credible. And I've actually met him, or certainly an aspect of him. It's terrifying, to be honest, to meet an entity of that power, but it does exist, and there are other fallen angels that came here with him. So they're all over the place. No wonder things go wrong for us, because it's all being engineered. So he deals in half-truths, and he makes things difficult for us. Now, the devil aims to enslave the human race, or failing that, to destroy it. Yeah. So he basically wants to run this planet with a slave race. He doesn't want interference from outside. He's got interference from outside. He doesn't want that. And so he's doing his best to bring the nations back into his enslavement. And then a good example of that enslavement, I put this in an earlier lecture of mine, is what happened in Central America. Now, you've probably seen things about the Aztecs and the Maya. You've maybe even seen the movie Apocalypto, which is horrible. I mean, not really. I think it's the most frightening movie I've ever seen. But we had a culture there where people were being regularly sacrificed, their hearts being ripped out of them, still beating, and being offered to the sun, or to statues, stinking statues covered in blood and flies and horrible. And they put the live hearts, and there they are beating in a bowl as an offering to these gods. And why were they doing that? Well, when you read the Popol Vuh, you discover very quickly that what happened was Perhaps it's just, the American equivalent of Noah's flood. There was a terrible time, storms, great tidal waves of people, many people killed. Those few who survived went up into hills, and they were cold and they were hungry and they didn't have fire. And this, they call him a god, let's call him a fallen angel, offered them the gift of fire. But on one condition, that they give him sacrifices of hearts. So they made a covenant. Yeah, a covenant is a deal. It's you sign a contract, and they signed a contract with his being that in return for his help, giving them fire, that they were sacrificed to him. This is how the devil works, and he's been doing that for thousands of years, maybe millions for all I know. But that contract, they couldn't break out of it. It took Hernan Cortez, who, let's face it, was not necessarily a very pleasant man. He was very cunning, though. If you read stories about him, he was a very charming man. He wasn't, a brutal guy coming in. He's a very charming man. And he kind of was able to manipulate things, take control there. And they had a big battle, and 200 Spanish soldiers, with some help from local tribes, managed to overthrow the Aztec Empire of millions. You wonder how that happened? Well, it's actually an exorcism. That's what happened. It was actually Jesus Christ bringing the power of Christianity to Mexico through him. You needed someone like him to do it. Wouldn't be worth sending a friar, would it? A simple friar, come and convert to my religion. He'd find himself up on that pyramid having his heart ripped out. He wouldn't get anywhere. You need someone like him. So I'm digressing here. He's very cunning, and he wants to enslave the human race, just like with the Aztecs. That's the plan. And callous, there's too many of us. Get rid of some. And the rest can serve me and my chosen elite, who serve me at a higher level. That's the plan. But of course, it's been defeated already. Jesus Christ came here, as prophesied in the Old Testament, and went through the whole crucifixion, resurrection, ascension, and he's coming back. So anyway, one of the devil's plans is to start wars, and you see this happening again. I mean, it happens all the time, doesn't it? The start wars. Think about the Second World War, how that came about. 1933, I think it was, Hitler came to power. This drifter, this man who was a failed painter, corporal in the army in the First World War, how on earth did he end up running most of Europe? How on earth did that come about? Well, it came about because he was demonically possessed. Simple as that, He was just the puppet in the hands of the devil. And the devil took him and he placed his throne in Germany, the devil's throne, and extended the German Empire under the Nazis to engulf and encompass the entire continent of Europe almost, only a few exceptions, Britain notably, except for the Channel Islands, which were occupied. But apart from that, France was taken, and all the Benelux countries, Norway was taken, Poland, Czechoslovakia, eventually Italy, Greece. What we would now call the European Union was in Hitler's hands, and he pressed on into Russia. Now, interestingly, the stumbling block which stopped him was Great Britain. Why was that? Why did Great Britain hold out? Is it just that we have 20 miles of channel? No, it's not that at all. Yes, that certainly was important, but Britain stood out because Britain is the home of the Israelites. Now, I don't just mean the Jews, the lost tribes of Israel. There are other tribes actually in the rest of Europe, but Britain is the epicenter of it. That's why we have the Stone of Destiny. This is all going to come out very soon when Jesus returns. You're going to find out all about this, but I'm going to do lectures on that as well. And the other country that's so closely linked, there's the descendant nations from Britain, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, parts of it, and the British Empire fought back, but also the United States. And the United States is today the battleground. And the United States is also of Israel. Yes, I know there's the Jewish state of Israel, which we all call Israel. It should actually be called Judah, because the Jews are descended from the tribe of Judah and Benjamin and the Levites. They're not the lost tribes of Israel. The lost tribes of Israel are elsewhere, in Europe, particularly in Britain and in America and in the Commonwealth. So this is why Britain was able to stand up to Nazism. And if one day I might take a camera down to a little chapel we have here at Biggin Hill, which was the centre of fighter command resisting at the Battle of Britain in 1940. Britain stood alone. America wasn't yet in the war. Everywhere else, France had fallen, everywhere else had fallen in Europe under the onslaught of the Nazi machine, war weapon, just steamrolled over everyone. And it was just a handful of fighters, the Spitfires and the Hurricanes, and the young men who flew them, that held back the greatest air force in the world at the time, which was Germany. And they defeated them. And so Britain came through and eventually became the launching platform for the great invasion from Normandy. I'm not belittling the role of Russia. Russia was also extremely important. I don't think we could have won the war without Russia as well, the USSR. But that's interesting because that is also a demonic empire, it was. And the Russian people had their revolution against the Tsar. They had in mind to establish a democracy. You know, the working people have workers' rights and, voting and elected officials and get rid of corruption and all of that. But the Bolsheviks came in and they took over and they turned it into a horrible dictatorship that lasted 70 years. Same thing happened with the French Revolution. You know, when the French first unlocked the Bastille and let the prisoners out and, hooray, liberté, fraternité, égalité, etc., and a great liberation from the tyranny of the Habsburg, no, it wasn't the Habsburg, it was the Bourbons empire in France. That's what they had in mind. They were going to be free. They're going to be a democracy, just like America's become. But then, of course, you get the Jacobins step in, Robespierre. You suddenly get this whole awful thing with the guillotining, the terror, and people being put under terror, and more people having their heads chopped off. First of all, king and queen and the aristocracy, but then it starts coming down lower and lower down the tree. You get Danton murdered in his bath, and eventually Robespierre himself is put on the guillotine. And then you get the rise of Napoleon, another great imperialist driven by Satan to take over the whole world, full of vanity, this little corporal from Corsica. And eventually what he rubs up again against Great Britain. Can't get out, he can't get his ships out. He's defeated at Trafalgar in 1805, and then later on he's defeated thoroughly at Waterloo. So this is kind of how history has been. The devil uses people. He takes over nations, stirs them up, creates world empires which he can then control and turn into dictatorships, horrible places. We've seen this with communist China in 1949, I think it was, when they took over. The Chinese, they wanted to have a nice, civilized culture, get rid of the corrupt emperors. And what do they get instead? They get this horrible communist dictatorship. That's the devil's work. So the Jews are obviously also of Israel, and so the whole push against the Jews, which has gone right through history, is the desire of the devil to destroy the people of Israel, destroy the Jews particularly, because they're the ones who gave birth to the Messiah. It's prophesied in the Bible, and it happened. That's why Hitler was pushing people into the gas chambers who were Jewish. He wanted to eliminate the nation completely. And he would have done the same to the British if he could have done. So this is what we're up against. We're up against this seriously evil, malicious angel who's got huge intelligence and a lot of power. And we have to turn to a power that's greater than his if we want to survive this. And that power, of course, is Jesus Christ and the church, which he established on earth, that will not be overthrown. He's promised to us that. And all devils have to bow to him. And if you're ever confronted by a devil, call on his name and cast it out. You can do that. I've done that before. And you can do that. So be aware that you are not alone in this fight. And at the moment, the battleground is America. That there's a fight going on for the soul of America. And that is crucial. Just as Britain was the centre of the battle in 1940, the attack on London, bombing London, attack on all the airfields to destroy the Royal Air Force, and the desire to take over this island off the coast of Europe. That was the focus in 1940 for Hitler. And he gave up when he realised he wasn't going to win there because he wanted to go and have a go at Russia. A madman. But then the devil does drive people completely crazy. So right now, he's fighting with America. And this too is because they are of Israel and are a hindrance to him, just as Britain also had been in the past. Yeah, we hindered Napoleon, we hindered Hitler, we hindered the Kaiser. We've hindered lots of people in the past trying to turn Europe into a dictatorship. And we've actually done the same with the EU now. The EU is a honey trap. And again, I told you, the devil is very clever. And it comes back to this idea of how do you boil frogs? Well, you fill a pot with cold water and you put your frogs in it. And they're quite happy, they're swimming around in the water, yeah, it's okay. And you feed them, a bit of food. And the frogs say, oh, well, okay, it's all right here. But then you put them on the stove and you slowly heat up the water. You don't do it quickly. They'll jump out if you do it too quickly. You slowly heat up the water. And that's what the European Union's done. It started off as a trading bloc, European Economic Community. Everyone thinks, wonderful, we'll trade together. Yeah, we'll sell you our cars, we'll buy your apples, and we'll buy stuff from you, you'll buy stuff from us. Everyone trades, everyone gets rich. Fantastic. What could be better? But it pretty soon turned into the European Union, and it started having a flag and a national anthem and a president and a parliament. And then there's talk about it having its own army. And you suddenly realise that, hey, just a minute, we joined as a trading bloc. No. You've got to obey what the European Court of Justice tells you. And we are now in charge. Our laws are above your laws. You do as we say. So we have a dictatorship happening with unelected officials running the show. Nobody voted for Ursula von der Leyen, whoever she is, this failed German politician who's now running the European Union. Nobody voted for her. And you've got so many diverse nations that even if we had a vote, the nations, some of them might think, well, actually, yeah, she's promised us some money, and we haven't got very much. She's going to take money from those other guys. Yeah, we'll vote for her. You play one side off against the other, and that's how it's done, But right now, yes, we've come out of the European Union. Britain couldn't stay in there. We are not going to be a boiled frog. I think other countries will leave too before long. But the real battleground at the moment is the United States, because the United States is the biggest hindrance to the devil's plan to take over the world. His last chance, his last throw of the dice, whole antichrist thing. So what is he up to now? Well, today the devil, Satan, is using other tactics. Science is used to discredit the notion of God as creator. Now, if you say that you believe that God created the universe, people say, oh, he's a creationist, he's an idiot, he doesn't know, he hasn't read his Darwin, he doesn't know about selection, natural selection of the fittest, he doesn't know how it just evolves. Well, I can promise you, and I've done quite a lot of chemistry in my life, you can take a test tube and you can put some amino acids and stuff in there, and you can keep it warm and, for 1,000 years, it's not going to turn into life. And you can take your germs and your bacteria, they're not going to evolve into elephants. You can give them billions of years if you like. It won't happen, because life forms come about through the mind. The mind creates, and the matter is then formed into the shape of the form from the mind. That's how creation's done. It's done. That's how, my house is built on plans. I've got the plans. They don't go out and they say, right, let's have a house here. Right, you got some bricks, Charlie? Oh, yeah. You brought the cement, John, have you? Yeah, right. Well, let's mix up some cement and we'll put some bricks up and we'll have a house. That's not how it's done, is it? It's all done carefully with plans. Everything has to be in the right place at the right time and the right materials to make it work. And you think about your body, it's immensely complicated. So how on earth would you evolve a kidney? How on earth would you evolve an eyeball? How on earth would you evolve a heart? How on earth would you evolve a liver and a brain? And how would you get all those different things to work together as one unit, just like a functioning perfect machine? It's not just going to happen. You can have as many billion years as you like, and you can watch as much David Attenborough as you like. It does not happen that way. The seeds are planted here. That's what it says in the Bible. The seeds are planted here. Yes, they can mutate within certain parameters, but the species have to be coming from the blueprint. That's how it works. And that blueprint's in your DNA, isn't it? And that DNA is a code. And I've written computer code. I've been a computer programmer. And believe me, that code has not just happened arbitrarily. It's the most complex code that you can imagine. Far more than you could imagine, actually. And it comes from a very, very high brain. And we're talking about the mind of God, or certainly high archangels working for God. So this is how things come about. But we're taught the wrong. We're taught things which look so they could be true. We're taught science that looks like it could be right, because it makes use of some of the right terminology and it looks clever and it uses mathematics. But it can actually be complete nonsense. But it's all done to confuse you and to take you away from the belief in a creator, that you are created, that you are a soul living in a body. You are not your body. And your soul is not a function of your body. It is you, and it will live on after you die. If you don't believe me, there's any number of videos on YouTube of people who died and came back. And they will tell you about their experiences and how they found themselves out of their body and how they saw their body on the operating table and the doctors working trying to revive them. They'll tell you all that. And they'll tell you then they went up this white tube and they found themselves in this place of great love and angelic peace, and they met their relatives who had died before them, their friends, all there. And they'd have a life review of what they've achieved in that life and what they need to do perhaps in another one. They'll tell you this. So you can read all about that or watch it on YouTube. And there's books about it as well. So don't believe them. Don't believe this Darwinian hypothesis, which is actually a heresy. And you need to get back to understanding that we are living on a planet which is at the center of a war. And it's a war between God and Satan. And we are part of the soldiers who are in the trenches. And it's not necessarily a comfortable place to be. So that's the reality of where we are. So right, today the devil has a new weapon, right? And that new weapon goes under the name of woke. Now, I don't care who you are or what you say of me, but someone who tells a boy he can become a girl, or a girl she can become a boy, is lying. Is lying. Now, who lies? Who tells the biggest lies, the biggest whoppers? The devil. If you take that child and you castrate that boy and tell him he is now a girl, you have committed a terrible crime, terrible evil, and you will be punished for it, I promise you. Unless you repent and find forgiveness, you will be punished for that evil, because you've done something terrible to that young boy. And this is the whole thing about this whole woke culture, that it is upsetting and upturning values. It's discrediting what is true, and it is establishing lies, and trying to get people to subscribe to those lies, or they'll lose their job, they'll lose their position, they'll lose their finance, they won't have education for their children. They've got to toe the line and go along with the party line. It's just like Stalin's gulags and so on, which is being engineered in a different way in America. It's being engineered in a way that undermines and corrupts the culture, undermines and corrupts the people, and gets those who are telling the lies to say, well, I'm virtuous because I believe that Black Lives Matter. Well, so does everybody else. Doesn't give you the right to go and burn other people's properties and loot their shops. Doesn't give you that right. Yeah. So this is what you're up against in America. And America is in the battleground at the moment of this whole struggle with the devil, struggle with Satan, because he knows America is the biggest obstacle. America is the one that manufactured all the ships and the planes and so on in such large quantities that the war was bound to be won. It had the power and the wealth to do that. Britain didn't. Britain could resist and could hold out, but it didn't have enough power to be able to overwhelm the Nazis. So America was the power that was able to do that after Pearl Harbor, and thank you, America, for doing that. But now you are the battleground. Europe was the battleground then. You are the battleground now. And the battleground is to destroy you so that totalitarian powers, perhaps from China, perhaps from somewhere else, can take over power and run this world. So, who is the Antichrist? Right, well, I've got another little analogy for you here. Have you ever seen that film, The Matrix? It's one of my favourite films because it's so truthful. It's a metaphor, but it's so truthful. You have the good guy, right? Neo. Name anagrams to one. So Neo is the one. And he has to find in himself his supernatural side. Yeah? Well incarnated, we can call it that, in this fantasy world, this matrix of the mind that he finds himself in. And he has to overcome the feeling that he's just controlled. Remember, find his powers within that realm as a free individual. That's part of it. But there's also his enemy, and his enemy is Agent Smith. And Agent Smith starts out as this very nasty gangstery type who can pick you up off the street and interrogate you, can use his mind magic to close your mouth, and so you can't even open it. The lips joined together to show that he has control over that medium, that sphere, that matrix. And eventually Neo gets enough understanding and power, but this Smith can jump into other people at will. People walking down the street and suddenly they turned into Smith. And in the later ones, he can multiply himself. He becomes multiple Smiths. Yeah, the later movies in the series. Sorry if I'm spoiling the plot for you if you haven't seen it. But this is a metaphor for the devil. And everyone who mouths the wokeness, who tells the lies. Telling lies is a very big sin, by the way. It's something that we maybe do all the time. You know, you don't want to hurt someone's feelings, you tell a little white lie. Well, that's probably excusable. But people are always looking for excuses to make excuses for things they haven't done when they should have done, or things that they did do that they shouldn't have done. They do that all the time. So we have to remember that we must not play the devil's game. Yeah, we shouldn't be telling little boys that they can be girls, or that they should not have boys' toys. They should be playing with dolls. And similarly with girls, we shouldn't be saying to them, well, you can be a boy if you want, Yeah, little girls, some of them are tomboys for a little while they're small. They want to play with the boys. But biologically and psychologically, they're still girls, and you've got to respect that. And the whole idea that you can authorize people who are physically men to go into the women's changing rooms pretending that they're women, I mean, what kind of madness is that? But this is where America is right now. And America is on a knife edge. America is where the battleground is. And it's now got an empty shell president. And who knows what's going to happen in the next 3 years before they have another election and get someone sensible back in the White House. I'm sorry if I'm being political here, but the problem is that I can't run away from it because it's true. And it is what has happened in America. So you have got Antichrist speaking through the lips of thousands of journalists, thousands of politicians, thousands of big business leaders, all the people who tell you to bend the knee, the people who tell you that you must not object to this wokeness being taught in schools, the people who tell you that it's perfectly fine for a woman to kill off the unborn child in her womb. No problem at all. Just go down to the doctor, he'll suck it out for you. This is all against life. It's against God. It's against the Holy Ghost. And you will be extremely, sorry that you've done this when the time comes. And if you've been doing this, up till now, I advise you very strongly to start reading your Bible and to start learning about the truth of Christianity, because it's coming, and it's coming hard. And this is almost like a last warning. So will there be an Antichrist as a single person? Well, it says that, but it also says in the Bible that Christ is coming back. But it also says that the body of Christ is the church. That's his body, it says. So in the sense that those who stand up on his side, and say, we reject the lie, we stand for the truth, we stand for God, we stand for Jesus Christ, they're on one side. Those who support the lie, who believe, well, they don't really believe it, but I'm going to say it anyway because they're going to pay me money. I can make big bucks this way. Yeah, all those who think money is what matters most are the ones who are taking the mark of the beast. And I've told you before in an earlier lecture that 666 is the number of gold talents that Solomon was paid every year, as his kind of his wealth, his taxes that he was able to get. It was this love of wealth, love of money above all else, is the mark of the beast. And if you take that attitude, you're going to go down to hell. So I warn you, and this is, well, a last chance saloon. We're all in it. I'm not perfect either, far from it. But we need to wake up to the citizen Smiths around us, yeah, the agent Smiths. Wake up to who we really are, that we are actually souls in bodies. We're not just animals for the slaughterhouse. And wake up to us, our true identity and our duty to ourselves, to our children, our grandchildren and future generations, and our duty to God. So I think on that point, as I said, it was a different lecture from usual. I'm going to leave it there. But perhaps there will be an Antichrist, a single figure. We wait and see. So thank you very much for your time.